when I talk to communities about their story, I see a lot of people that fold their arms and give me that look, you know, that look, the look that says, I know where you're going with this. Kool-Aid, campfires, and kumbaya. Story time. What's important about a story? Do communities have stories? Is it important to tell them? I'll give you a brief definition of what we like to think is a community story. It's the same thing, it's the same story that you have. It's who you are, what you do, what you've done, how you do it. That's all components of your story. Your story is also what people say behind your back. From a community's perspective, that's not something that people think about a lot, is what are people thinking behind our backs as a community. Is story valuable? Story is incredibly valuable. People think about story as something that they don't have a responsibility to tell. And the fact of the matter is that if you're not busy telling your story, there are plenty of other people who are looking for the opportunity to tell your story for you. I'm going to tell you a story about a community in North America. 50 years ago, it had the highest income per capita in North America. It was the richest city in North America, one of the richest cities in the world. People were happy to live there. There was a great quality of life. Everything was going for them. And 50 years later, today, they have one of the highest rates of literacy in North America. If you get injured, you're probably not going to get an ambulance right away. Child poverty levels are through the roof. Anybody want to take a stab at which city that is? Whoa! Absolutely. How is that possible? They had a great story. They had everything going for them, and yet 50 years later, their story is completely different. One of the recurring things that I want to talk about is futures are created, not awaited. That's the importance of story. How are you telling your story, and how are you telling it best? Your story isn't something that who you are today, but the most important component of your story is who you want to be tomorrow. What are the steps that you're going to take to get there? How do the people who are living that story and growing that story together understand that they're singing from the same songbook, that they're looking at the same page, that they're moving in the same direction together? So here's 5 things that you can do today to help grow your community story and make it stronger. The first thing is measure it. Everybody has a book on their table, Vital Signs. That's a fantastic piece of information. I flipped through it, and it's probably one of the more comprehensive pieces of information associated with the community that I've had the privilege of seeing. Very well done. Absolutely. Give yourself a hand. It is critically and vitally important to measure the health of your community. Vital Signs is full of a lot of numbers. There's a lot of metrics associated in there. There's very comprehensive metrics associated with the community. And yet there's another piece of information that's equally as important. See, it's not just metrics and it's not just numbers that are associated with the community, but there's also perceptions. One of the most desirable cities in the world to live in is Vancouver. And yet some of the most discontented people in the world happen to live in Vancouver. The metrics say that it is an absolutely incredible city to live in, and it's very desired from the rest of the world, and yet the people who are living there don't feel that it's as good as it can be. One of the metrics that it's important to measure is perceptions. Perceptions of people outside of your community and people inside your community. Part of the work that we do is go into communities and ask them about what's your story today and what do you want to be tomorrow. And we ask people about what are the best things about your community. Invariably the answer that comes back, especially in British Columbia communities, is we love our community because it's beautiful. We've got mountains and rivers. Don't forget the trees and the creeks that we have. And the sunsets here are absolutely spectacular. We say that's absolutely wonderful. That's probably the case of almost every community in British Columbia. What else makes your community special? And they say, community spirit. Community spirit makes us really special. We have a really incredible, this is such a friendly community and I love living here because we have incredible community spirit. We say, absolutely. Where do you find that community spirit evidenced? That's a really tough question that people have a tough time answering. The room goes silent and people start wondering, where is our community spirit? How do we see it evidenced? We had good community spirit when we turned out at that terrible, tragic incident that involved deaths of numbers of members of our community. That was a good showing of community spirit. But then somebody says, who would want to live in a community where people didn't get together in times of tragedy? What do we do together in times of celebration that gives us a good sense of community spirit? You can measure your metrics all that you want, but measure the experience, measure the how we live together. Try and put that together, because in the future, as you move ahead, it's going to be important to demonstrate, as you continue to tell your story, it's going to be important to demonstrate that you're actually making success. What are the perceptions of the day, and how can we strengthen those perceptions moving forward into the future? One of the ways that you can help strengthen those perceptions is to break rules. And not just rules, but pretty much break anything. Break convention, break stereotypes, especially break down silos. When people think about community, and especially I think there's a lot of people in this room, probably a higher amount of people than average that actually think about community. People who have conversations about communities regularly. That's about as exciting as taking your fork and sticking it in your eye, right? Breaking silos is critically important, and it can start happening tomorrow, and all you need to do is get your economic development officer and your tourism officer and somebody from the city together and sit them down in the same room and say, hey, let's talk. Communities are absolutely wonderful at working in silos. You get a lot of redundancies. Somebody's doing something over here and somebody's doing the same thing over here, and a year later you discover that you've been working on the same project. The more that you can get together and break down those silos, the stronger community that you're going to have, the better collaborative relationships that you're going to have, and the more confidence you're going to have from the people in your community that things are actually getting done. Break conventions. Conventions associated with communication. There's a perception that Tofino is a pretty wet place, right? I think some of the highest rainfall average in North America takes place in Tofino. Not a place that you want to go for a vacation, right? Wrong. It's not wet. We have storm watching. Break the convention, break the stereotypes, break the perceptions, and do things with them. Communities are really adept at using this little word, can't. We can't do that. Wouldn't it be amazing if we did something together, but we can't do that because that agency they have to lead it. They have to do it. We can't do it. We actually don't have the budget for it. We don't have the capacity for it. We can't do that. Break it. Don't focus on the problem. Focus on the possibility. What is a possibility? There's loads of problems that we're going to encounter on a day-to-day basis, but what are the possibilities? What are the things that we can be moving towards? And what are the things that we can break in order to make sure that we can capitalize on them? If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. People think about products a lot when they think about their community. They think about infrastructure, and they think about the activities that they can do, and they think about the businesses that they have. But what people sometimes forget to think about is the experience that's associated with their community. What experience is associated with your community? How do you do things? If you walk into the economic development office or you walk into the tourism office and you pick up a brochure and you read it, you can see that laundry list with the logo salad at the bottom, all the things that your community has to offer. We've got kayaking and bird watching and skiing and mountain biking and road biking and walking and hiking and all those things. The list goes on and on. But people don't know how to interact with that. People coming to visit the community not only don't know how to interact with that, but people within your own community don't know how to interact. How do you do things in Golden? How do you do things differently? What are the possibilities associated with that? People are focused on product instead of being focused on experience. One of the challenges that people have is that when they talk about their product, they're usually talking about it in a way that they're trying to sell it. How do we sell our community? Come visit Golden. Psst, do you want to buy some real estate? We got some real estate here that you can buy. There's a sell insinuated in the messaging and in the story that you're trying to tell people. People don't want to be sold to. They want to share an experience. They want to share in your story. They want to feel like they're being taken advantage of. And unfortunately, when people set out to tell a community story, they're often telling it in a way so that they're selling it. Facts tell, but stories sell. What are the stories associated with your community that are going to resonate with people, that are going to make them say, I want to be a part of that story? How do I share it? Talking together. This is probably, I think, the most vital thing that a community can do. This is absolutely essential to the health and the well-being of the communities going forward. How many times have you sat in a room like this and had a conversation together and talked about the community? Just a show of hands, how many times has that happened here? Awesome. Is it going to keep happening in the future? A study by the Vancouver Foundation went through Vancouver and they asked people what the greatest challenges that the community faced. And they anticipated that the responses were going to be either poverty or health. What do you think the single greatest challenge from the citizens of Vancouver? What do you think the single greatest challenge is? Absolutely. Alienation, loneliness. In an age with more communication conduits than ever before, where people supposedly are more connected than ever before, in the greatest city in the world to live, the single biggest challenge that they're facing is loneliness, alienation, the inability to connect with one another. Where do you talk together? What do you talk about? How do you meet people? What does that look like? In order for a community to be resilient and sustainable and have a future that they're creating together, people have to be together and they have to be talking about it. Innovation councils, there's innovation boards at every level of government. Innovation is the juxtaposition of two ideas previously unintroduced. How do you get new ideas introduced to each other? It requires communication, it requires talking, it requires some space and a culture that values the sharing of ideas. This is step number 72, if you're noticing the numbers. Healthy communities, resilient communities, vibrant communities, communities that are taking control of their future are communities that are confident enough to ask this question, what if? That's a really bold question. It means that people are together and they're confident enough communicating with each other that they can take the time to sit down and ask awkward questions and difficult questions and have difficult conversations associated with it. But there's a huge amount of value in a community for taking the time to talk together, sit down and ask, what if? That's it. Measure it, break the rules, think about experience, don't sell it, share it. Talk together and ask what if. Does everybody know Jane? Jane Jacobs? Reading Jane Jacobs is like taking a fork and sticking it in your eye as well. Jane says, community, innovate or die. In order for communities to continue to grow, to be sustainable, we have this epidemic in British Columbia of resource-based communities that no longer have the resources that they needed. And they're asking themselves, why are we here? Why do we exist? How do we reinvent ourselves going forward? And reinvention requires innovation, and innovation requires communication. That's sitting down and talking with each other. You're all doing it here tonight. I applaud you for that. Good luck, Golden, in making your story stronger. Thanks.